Hey guys, if you're listening to this episode, please note that this original recording and released under the Balance Boss Mom podcast. The podcast has since evolved and is now called The Balance with Erika B. This is a previously recorded conversation that I believe is truly worth hearing, listening, and seeing. Please disregard the introduction where I reference to the Balance Boss Mom podcast, as this episode was created before the rebrand. Again, guys, I want to thank you for continuing this journey with me, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Bye, guys. Hey mamas, welcome back to the Balance Boss Mom podcast, where we're redefining balance, building businesses, and becoming the women we are always meant to be. Before we dive in, I'm going to do a quick trigger warning because today's episode includes conversations about being burnt out, body image struggles, perfectionism, and the pressures of diet cultures. If that feels tender for you, just take care of yourself, pause, take a break. I always say in my trigger warnings, make sure you take a break and come back to this episode. But today's conversation is one that I know so many of us need to hear. We're talking about where and when and what it really means to stop abandoning yourself and start living and stop existing. I am so excited to have Andrea come onto this show. Andrea is a 5-time best-selling author, certified bar coach, a podcast host, a speaker, and the founder of Balance and Bliss. Her work centers around helping women reconnect with their power, redefine their wellness, and step into their lives with clarity, confidence, and trust. Now, throughout her own journey navigating burnt out body image struggles and breaking free from a diet culture, she now helps women come back to home to themselves. I am so excited because we finally get to have you on the podcast. And we finally get to have an amazing conversation. So, without further ado, Andrea, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. That was such a lovely introduction. And I always find myself smiling when people are reading the bio because it's like the little girl in me is like, oh my gosh, we did that. Like, that's so cool that is now how you get to serve the world and show up for women using your story. And so I'm always really just like, I take a minute of like gratitude for all of the parts of me that made that bio possible.
Well, I am glad that I was able to do the bio because I was like, this is amazing. And so I'm glad that you're on the show. I'm glad you're able to share your story with me. And so I want to kind of get into your journey, like your transformation story. Where did it begin? Where did it start off? And we'll lead up to more of this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, it is a long one as everyone's journey is, but I just want to preface by saying, for anybody who's listening, the conversation that you're going to hear today is from a woman who has done a lot of work on herself. And so you might be hearing some of the things that I'm saying and thinking like, oh, I could never do that or be that, or like it might feel like there's this big separation between you and me, when really we are all just on different parts of our growth journey, and we actually have the potential to be and become anything that we want to be. But really, ultimately, it comes down to how we treat ourselves and the relationship with ourselves. So I have always had this innate desire to serve within me. I didn't really have the language for it, of course, at that time, but it was just like, I know that I want to make the world a better place. And my favorite quote in the whole wide world is, be the change you want to see in the world, by Mahatma Gandhi. And I studied in the social services world right out of high school. So I went to college for social services, social work. That was a 2-year program. Right from there, I went out into the field, worked frontline in mental health and crisis and all of these things, and always had this. I was always helping people, and throughout that time as well, I was on my own journey. That my first introduction into personal growth was when I went to college, and my instructor said to me, she said to everyone, but she said this and it really stuck with me, was that you have to unpack your own stuff before you can help other people unpack theirs. And that was it really stuck with me. And so I did a bit of self-exploration at that time, and as a lot of women are, I also was on kind of like a health journey at that time. So I was in a place where I was unhappy with my body. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought that by losing weight, I would feel happier with my body. And so I did. I accomplished that weight loss goal. And I want to put a caveat here that there's nothing wrong with having a weight loss goal. I think where it becomes a slippery slope is the motivation behind it and the way that you feel and speak about yourself behind that, which of course, again, at that time, I was like, I'm going to lose all the weight and then everything's going to feel better in my life, you know? And so I became a mom as well, um, in 2015. And I remember when I peed on the stick and I got the result, that I was pregnant, my first thought was, oh, I'm going to have to gain all the weight that I just worked so hard to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And that should have been an indication for me that like there was still more work to be done internally, but of course it wasn't. And I had a daughter, and anybody who's listening who's a mom, Erika, you can probably relate to this. It's like you have your child and you start to reevaluate everything. You're
That is so
like,
true.
you think about your upbringing, you think about how you were raised, you think about, and you know, I'm definitely a very reflective person by nature, have like really deep self-awareness. And so, you know, I'm thinking about like all my own body stuff and
Mm-hmm.
how I don't want to pass that on to my daughter. And so I was really conscious in those early days of how I spoke about myself, not because I believed it, but because I wanted her to believe it. But what if I know anything about the power of repetition in the mind is that when you're like consistently repeating the same thing, you start to believe it.
Right.
And so I transitioned out of social work slowly over a period of time. I talk about this whole transition in my book that just launched in March. I started to learn about coaching and entrepreneurship and how
Mm-hmm.
I could help in a different way and use what I have learned. Like I all throughout this time I was also like growing and healing in different ways. And that kind of like I followed all of the stepping stones and all of the nudges into different directions to get me to this place that I'm at now where I feel so honored to, you know, be in this podcast with you and to be speaking into everybody who's listening about the power that we all have
Mm-hmm.
to rewrite our inner narrative and our inner stories and our inner dialogue and really tune, like harness the relationship with ourselves and make that of the utmost importance and following our dreams and passions and all of those things. And so like I just get to talk about that stuff all the time now. And that's like the coolest thing ever that I have created that life for myself from this 18-year-old girl who just wanted to make the world a better place.
And that is such a cool story to start off with this conversation, because I feel like as a kid, you go through all these different stages of life, especially when you're in high school, you know? And high school is like something where I had struggled a lot with my body because let me see, when I was in high school, I weighed like 98 pounds. And I was 98 pounds throughout my whole life, you know? Until finally about when I was like maybe 20, about 20 years old, 2021, I started gaining weight, and I kind of had the kind of like the self reflection of, okay, I'm gaining weight, but I don't like gaining the weight because I've been so tiny all my life. Fast forward, get pregnant with my daughter in 2018, and I'm like, okay, now I'm really gaining the weight back. Like now I'm like went from 98 to 176. And so I've had this whole body image struggle with myself where I'm kind of like, why talk negative when I need to start talking positive into my body? And I think that's something where in high school you would see all the pretty girls and, just different cliques, all that starts happening and all of that. So I try to speak affirmations into my daughter now where I say, you're beautiful, you're smart, you're amazing, you're talented, raise your hand, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. These are teachers that are here to help you. And so I think that's where the self abandonment comes into, because, like you said, you speak so powerfully about self abandonment. And I want to unpack that because I think a lot of women don't realize that they're really beautiful on the outside, but they're also beautiful on the inside.
Yeah, and you said something that it kind of sparked something for me. You said that you try and teach your daughter all of these things that you were never taught. And I think that, we grew up, or myself anyway, I grew up in a time where, of course, our parents were only doing the best that they could with what
Mm-hmm.
they knew at the time, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so millennials are the generation who are doing all of the healing, all of the cycle breaking. Like I really feel like we're the pioneers in that. And I don't ever remember growing up being taught to speak kindly to myself or being
Mm-hmm.
taught to love myself. It was always like, make sure you're nice to Johnny, be nice to all the
Mm-hmm.
people around you or you're not going to have any friends. But
Mm-hmm.
nobody ever said, like, also be nice to yourself. And
Yeah.
the reality is that the relationship that you have with yourself is the longest relationship that you have ever been in and will ever be in. And
Yep.
if I think about how we build trust with the people around us, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
we trust people, we feel safe around people when they are nice to us, when they
Mm-hmm.
show up for us, when they
Mm-hmm.
make time for us, when
Mm-hmm.
they do things for us without even asking. Like, and when they're there for us when we need them. And that's how we build trust with others. But the trust that we build with ourselves is built the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us don't realize that self trust is really like the foundation. It's like the opposite of, well, maybe not the opposite, but self trust really is the foundation when it comes to whether or not you're going to abandon yourself
Mm-hmm.
because we we put ourselves out for other people all the time.
People
And
pleasing.
yeah, and we think that it's, selfish to prioritize ourselves. We think that it's vain to pat ourselves on the back for doing a good job or to sing our own praises
Mm-hmm.
or to speak up. Like a lot of us, I know myself, like I, for a long time, didn't feel comfortable speaking up for what I needed in friendships and in my relationship. And of course, that is as a result of the conditioning from society, that
Mm-hmm.
as a result of trauma that I have experienced as a child. I had this really deep fear of abandonment of other people. And so as a result, I was just like doing everything I could to make sure I never gave people a reason to not like me. And I was abandoning myself in at that time. And so as I have healed, and I mean, listen, I'm still healing, okay? This
I
launching
think
this
we,
book
as millennials, are still
hard.
healing because it's a lot of things that I tell my daughter now. I'm like, man, if you were in the era that I was in as when I was growing up, a lot of things you would not be getting away with. You
Mm,
will not be
mhm,
getting away with because her generation right now, they're so fast forwarding with technology and social media plays a lot into like the self-doubt and the self-trust, and we're going through a time right now where we're talking about friendships, and she's transitioned from, you go from pre-K to kindergarten, everybody's nice, everybody's friends, and then you go from kindergarten to first grade and you're still in that friends phase, but now she's going from first grade to second grade and she's like, mommy, I don't understand why this person don't like me. And so we're going through this kind of time because she's being bullied as a kid. And I remember in her age and in her space, it kind of took a flashback to me because I thought about it and I had to explain to her. I had a girl, her name was Amber, and I hope she's doing well in life, but she was bullied. She bullied me and she bullied me every single day, every day. Would take my glasses. She ended up eventually breaking my glasses in front of me in half. And when she broke my glasses, I finally had enough. I was like, I have to stand up for myself. So I did.
mm,
I eventually stood up for myself, got in trouble for it, but my mom was like, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. And so now teaching her that not everybody is, it sucks to teach your child that not everybody is your friend and what is a good friend versus a bad friend. Because if a good friend is someone that has good intentions, pure intentions for you. They don't sit there and just a couple months down the line just be like, oh, I'm going to be mean to you. And I had to explain to her, when somebody shows you that continued pattern where they're 1 minute they're nice to you and then you don't see each other for, let's say, a Christmas break or spring break or whatever the case may be, and they turn around back around and they become mean to you, that's not a friend.
mhm.
And so she was crying and she was really upset. And I was like, I said, you're going to make so many friends in your lifetime. I said, this is just one out the bunch, but you have to start learning to speak up for yourself now. I said, because you're getting in bigger grades and
Mhm.
you'll be my little third grader next year. And I said, they're going to get tougher. They're going to get meaner as the time goes on. I said, but you have to start speaking up. Run to the teacher. If the teacher don't listen, you make the teacher listen to you, you know?
Mhm.
And so that with her, she's right now also trying to be so perfect with her grades. And I had to tell her about, you don't have to be perfect. I'm happy with you making that B. It don't faze me. Now, if I see that you're kind of slipping, we're going to talk about it. But I said, you don't have to be perfect all the time. This is something new. These lessons that you're learning in class, they're teaching you these lessons because it's new. It's your first time learning addition versus subtraction. It's your first time learning multiplication versus division. Like they're doing algebra in the second grade. I don't see why they're doing algebra in the second grade because I'm like, this is way too. I was like, we didn't do this. We did the adding, subtracting,
Mhm.
multiplying, and division. That's simple. So I always teach her to just keep pouring love into herself. And one of the cool things that I can say about my kid that I love is at the end of the day, when she comes home, the very first thing is that she puts, and I've never seen a child do this, but she turns on YouTube and she puts on her Zen music and she's like, Mom, I'm going to color. And I'm like, who are you?
That's amazing. There honestly there are some, adults that don't have the self like the knowledge of leaning into those like things
Mm-hmm,
that make us feel good and taking the time for those things. That is one of the really common things that I see a lot with clients that I work with even is it's
mm-hmm,
like I know that there's these things that make me feel good, but I don't have time to do those things. And if I take those things, I'm going to take them away from something else and all the things that I
mm-hmm,
have to do. But being being calm and centered and balanced, which is literally why it's funny. I mean, you're the balanced mom. I am the
mm-hmm.
balance and bliss. And when I think about the word balance, it's funny because when I named my business back in 2018, and since then I've always gotten people who say like, why balance? Like it's impossible to achieve balance. It's like, how do you
I
balance
get
all
that
the
now.
things? And to me, balance is less about being able to juggle and manage all of the things that you have to do,
Mm-hmm,
and has everything to do with how much balance you have
mm-hmm,
internally through all of those things. And so to be able to check in with yourself of like, I'm feeling a little bit off. This isn't feeling good.
mm-hmm.
And noticing that and then giving yourself what you need to regulate in those moments, like that is such a gift. And you mentioned earlier on, um, I'm sorry that you experienced that bullying. Unfortunately, it's very common for people to have horrible kids
Mm-hmm.
in their lives that don't treat them nicely. But, another way that we often abandon ourselves is by giving our energy to people who don't deserve it and who are not treating it with kindness.
Mhm,
And we consistently there's a chapter in my book that talks about the importance of the relationship with other people, because it's like you deserve to have a life filled with people who treat you well. And
mhm,
yet so many of us, whether it's family, and then we get the like, well, they're family, you should be still showing up for them,
mhm,
or whether it's like friends we've had for a long time or whatever it is, we we keep allowing other people to treat us a certain way because of all of those things that I just listed off. But it's like, no, people don't get to treat us like that. And like you
I
said,
know.
we can stand up for ourselves, and it's actually okay to do that. And if
Mhm.
somebody's not treating you the way that you deserve to be treated, like elevate your standards and they will kindly fall away, ideally. Like, if the best
It's
case scenario happens, like that's what it needs to be then.
I love that you said that because it creates that, it's a boundary,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things I have learned as an adult that I didn't learn or was trying to learn when I was 18, 19 in my 20s, and now that I'm in my mid-30s. 30, just turned 36 in March.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you. What I learned in my mid 30s is that I'm setting boundaries, and if my boundaries are not met, you're cut off. And
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy because some of my friends are like, "You've changed."
Good.
Like, and I was like, "Well, that's what happens when you're, you know, when you're changing, you're elevating and growing. You
Mm,
have to change." And they're like, "Erica, how do you have so much patience?" I said, "Well, one of the things I've done is because I prayed for it, and I prayed for it since I was 18 to just give me patience, give me the guidance, and just try to follow through." And they're like, "Girl, I couldn't put up with what you be putting up with at work." I'm like, one of the things my grandmother has taught me is think of the check, not think about what's everything around you. And I'm like, okay, it goes back to the boundaries for me.
mm,
And I'm trying to teach my daughter where she has to create that boundary with these friends because later on in life, you're all probably going to go to the same high school or a different high school in life. And to learn how to create a healthy boundary in your life, it's okay to say, no, I'm not feeling well today. Or it's okay to say, I can't answer that email. I'm answering it tomorrow. It took me a while to understand that a little bit because I've always been the yes to everything.
mm,
And when you become yes to everything, you be receptive to saying, well, she said yes, so she's going to keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And then finally, I was like, you know what? I don't have to answer this phone at 2 a.m. in the morning. It's not worth my energy. So if it's not worth it, I'm not going to answer it. And so now I feel that some of my friends are starting kind of like, all right, I can't call her at 2 a.m. I'll just call her tomorrow.
mm-hmm.
Or I haven't talked to her in 2 weeks. Let me hit her up. And we just fall right back in line. And sometimes I'm happy with that because it's like I work throughout the day. I'm a mom. And going back to the word of the definition of being balanced, for me, when I first created the podcast, it was not only that balance for me meant to juggle everything at once as a mom. But the other flip side of being a balanced boss mom is you see the chaoticness that comes into your life and you understand that you don't have to have everything in one boat. You
Mm,
don't have to be happy all the time. You can have a sad moment. You can be upset in those reflections. Like just this last Friday, I almost quit my job.
mm-hmm.
I literally was like, this is not worth me crying every day. It's not worth me crying every day. And I had it. I had like a crash out moment at work. And normally I don't even have crash out moments, but it felt like I told my boss, I said, I said, it's something happening every month with me. Every month, every week. I was like, I'm doing all these plans with you guys. I said, I need a break
Mm,
before I break. And I was just crying. I said, and I told my boss, I said, I'm not going to argue with you anymore. I said, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to fight with you anymore. And I think that was me just like, I was like, like, I blew it. And normally I really don't. And so my boss had asked, she was like, is there anything else that you need from me? I said, no,
mm.
there's nothing else.
I like to think of boundaries as, people think like, oh, if you're, because to me what you really did last week is you put up a boundary. And I think oftentimes people think of boundaries as like walls. It's like you put up a
Mm-hmm.
boundary and it's like, don't come at me. But
Mm-hmm.
I actually like to think of boundaries as a bridge. It's like I'm here,
Mm-hmm.
you need to respect me from here, but
Mm-hmm.
this bridge is how it's almost like it teaches people how to treat you,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise they're going to treat you however they think that they can treat you. And so,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to your workplace, when it comes to your family, when it comes to friendships, even like honestly, boundaries for yourself, it's like, okay, here's an example of like a self boundary. It's like how many people, and maybe Erica, you can relate to this. It's like you feel really anxious and then you
Mm-hmm.
just like spiral forever. It's like, here we go, right? Like we're not coming back from this, but
Yeah.
it's like my own personal boundary is like, okay, Andrea, I know that anxiety comes up for you sometimes. I literally did this yesterday. I was sitting at my desk working and I was like, whoa, what is like happening in my chest right now? I was like feeling this anxious feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us would just push past it and allow the spiral to happen. But what I did is I was like, okay, I noticed this. And so I stopped and I was like, I'm just going to take a couple deep breaths and I'm just going to honor this feeling that's happening right now. Because typically, especially when it comes to emotions and feelings and sensations in our body, it's like they just want to be heard. They
Mm-hmm.
just want to be seen and felt. And so it's like I took a moment and I just sat there and I closed my eyes. I literally did this and I was like, and I breathed, I don't know, maybe about like 5 or 6 like deep breath rounds in and out. And I felt it get a little bit louder because I gave it attention, but then it like softened away. And it's like, how much different would we all be if we also just honored our own boundaries for ourselves? And if you don't know what those would be, like the important thing is to take a moment to think about those things. So it's like I have
Mhm.
this framework that I use, and the first letter of the framework is E. And the E stands for elevate your awareness. You can't create any sort of change if you aren't even freaking aware of what the baseline is and of like what's going on, and not from a place of like gaining this awareness to judge it all and to shame
Mhm.
yourself, but just to be curious of like, ooh, what's going on for me? Why am I always stressed out in this situation? Why am I always rushing through this task? Why am I, whatever it is, why do I always think this thought when I'm around this person or whatever? Like,
Or even in the workplace, why is this
yeah.
energy always like this in the workplace?
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, like I said last Friday, I was like, I can't. I was like, I can't. It's either I'm going to walk out of here and lose my job, or and I was talking to my coworker, and she was like, Erika, you're looking at this wrong. She was like, you're looking at this as a punishment. She said, don't look at it as a punishment with these the plans and the coachings and stuff. I said, but it's not happening to you. It's not happening to you every week. So you don't feel like you have to put this wall up or this guard up all the time, you know? And so I used to go from with this current job that I'm at, I used to go from saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because I used to close all the time. So now I don't even say anything at all. I don't say good morning. I don't say good afternoon to nobody. I don't say hello in the chat. I don't say nothing. I just show up to work, and then I'm like, all right, it's 7:30. It's time for me to leave. And that's sad because it's like you want to be at a workplace where you're content, you're happy, it's smooth sailing, you don't have to worry about it. It's less stress. And I think I'm coming into a boat where looking at things from an eye view where it's more I'm looking at things that I want to fulfill.
Mm.
And I was like, been in customer service since I was 13. And I've, all the time, just like I was on a call the other day, this lady said, I don't know what you're doing with your life. I've never met you. I don't know what you're doing with your life. She said, but whatever you're doing, she said, keep doing what you're doing. And I was like, and she was like, I know we're not supposed to be chatting like this on the call. She said, but something came over me where I needed to talk to you about. And I was like, okay, and I took it for what it was. And she said, you're so sweet. She said, you're such a beautiful person. She said, you took the time to help me. She said, I want to take the time to give you this message back. And
Mm.
she said, I don't know if your people are listening to this call. She said,
Mhm.
but whoever's listening to this call, she said, y'all need to give her a raise. She said, whoever's listening to this call, she said, she needs to be a caseworker. She said, she don't need to be in this position anymore. And I was like, why is she saying this on the recorded line? I'm like, wait, don't say too much. I don't want to draw attention to myself. But I told her, I said, I thank you for the message. I thank you for, I said, of course, my supervisor will hear this call at any point in time. And so, like you said, it's kind of like having those boundaries and building that bridge. You come and we meet that halfway. And I
Mm.
feel like sometimes with whether it's a workplace or friendships, not everything is 50-50 all the time, and sometimes you may not be 50% all the time.
Mhm.
Another thing that I love that when I came across your name was I love that you behind your name you had a message about redefining wellness. And I loved how you talk about not having that restriction or that hustle or just being whole with redefining that. So, can you explain a little bit about how you redefine your wellness to women?
Absolutely, I would love to. I shared a little bit earlier when I was talking about my story about how, I lost all the weight and I had thought that that would be what would bring me happiness. And
Mhm.
I was still really broken inside. And so when I think about like what wellness means, I mean, listen, there is a lot of value in how you nourish your body and how
Mhm.
you move your body, right? Those
Mhm.
things, think about a car. When you give the car good gas, it runs real nice. You know, when you take care of it, you take it in for maintenance. If you leave car sit for too long, it's like clunky when you try and move it again. Our bodies are designed to move, and they are craving being nourished well. Those things are super important, not only for the physical vessel, but
Mm-hmm.
also for your mind and your mental health, right? Like, when I know for me, if I haven't moved in a long time, I feel it in my mental health. I feel it in just like my fogginess and so on. So how you move your body and what you nourish your body with, super important. But those are the only two pieces that are talked about. This is where the redefining wellness comes in. It's like, what about what you're feeding your mind, right? What about the things that you are constantly exposing yourself to, whether it be through social media, the accounts that you follow, the news? Like, I don't fucking watch the news because
Oh,
I don't
yes.
need that energy in my life. Like, I
Same.
know what's going on in the world, but I don't consume every piece of that negativity. So like, what you're nourishing your mind with, how you
Mm-hmm.
speak to yourself, the relationship that you have with yourself, if you connect with nature, if you are connected to a higher power, whether that be God or source or the universe or Allah
Mm-hmm.
or Buddha or whatever, like being connected to something
Even
supports
music.
your wellness, like being connected to something, feeling some sort of passion and purpose, like all of those things are equally as, if not more valuable when it comes to your wellness, because that is like, so I, part of when I was in the social services world is I was a teacher, and I
Mm-hmm.
taught sociology, psychology, all of these like courses that really serve me well in my role now. But there was I think he was a psychologist, Abraham Maslow, and
Mm-hmm.
he had like the famous triangle, like the hierarchy of needs, right? Is it's
Mm-hmm.
like, these are all the things that we need as a human to feel the most fulfilled. And on the
Mm-hmm.
bottom of that is basic stuff, right? Food, shelter, safety, and security. We all
Mm-hmm.
crave those things naturally.
That's true.
But then beyond that, there's like love and belonging. We also need a lot of that. Those things are very, very
Those are true.
vital to
We
our
do need
wellness,
it.
right? And then at the very top of the pyramid is, it's called self-actualization. And don't ask me the official definition of that right now. I can't tell you what it is, but my interpretation of what self-actualization is when you are on your deathbed. Okay. And I want everybody to ask themselves, you too, Erica, think of this
Mm-hmm.
question. Maybe you'll ponder it as you go about your day or whatever. It's like, if you were on your deathbed right now,
Mm-hmm.
would you be completely satisfied with the way that your life is right now? Are
Probably
you
the answer is
following your
no.
dreams? Are you following your passions? Are you taking care of yourself the best that you can? Do you feel like you could speak to yourself so
Uh-oh.
kindly and so beautifully?
Hold
And
on.
if the answer is no,
Hold on.
that's okay. If the answer is no,
Mm-hmm.
then what are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Because we all are the author of our own stories, and we all have the ability to take ownership over our own stories. And if
Mm-hmm.
we don't like what is happening in our current reality, then we get to change that.
Yep. And that's something that to answer your question,
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna come back to the question, but all those passions is something that I am trying, like with the podcast, of course, trying to make sure everything happens in one boat. And I'm loving the podcast. Before we wrap up, I want to tell you something. I want to say thank you for being on this podcast with
Mhm.
me, because I've learned not only how to redefine wellness, and I can take this back with my little one to I mean, she's teaching me how to redefine wellness as going on YouTube. But I want you to tell people where to find you and where to look for you. And then one more other question. What does balance and bliss mean to you?
I love that question. So before I answer that question, so I am the Balanced Bliss everywhere. So you can follow me on Instagram at the Balanced Bliss. And I alluded a couple times to my book. The recent book that I launched is called Embody Bliss. And so if anything you've listened to in this conversation felt resonant to you, I am running a book club at the end of May into June for this book. And I imagine it'll be linked in the show notes where you can
Mhm.
find information about me. What balance and bliss means to me, I think that when you can achieve, if I ask you the question, do you want to be happy? I think everyone would answer the question yes. Everyone is on a pursuit to happiness. And I think that we've gotten really far from what that actually means.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think about balance and bliss to me is if you can live a life where you feel balanced within yourself. You feel like you know yourself, you honor yourself, you listen to yourself, you don't abandon yourself, and you can see the simple things in life.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole chapter about gratitude and just the simple things in life. That is how you achieve bliss. That is how you achieve the happiness that you are looking for. And I invite anyone to come have a conversation with me anytime about that in the DMs. I love voice notes. I love voice notes.
I love voice notes too. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I really, really appreciate you taking the time, and I love this episode. I really, really do. If this episode speaks to you, I want you to take a moment and ask yourself, where have you been abandoning not only yourself or, in life? And what would it look like to choose not only you today, but I'm going to also choose myself today going forward. But if you love this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, share it with another friend, a sister. You could share it with a brother. Hey, we don't judge over here at the Balanced Boss Mom, okay? And as always, everything will be linked in the show notes, including how to connect with Andrea and explore her work at Balance and Bliss. Also, don't forget to check out my Amazon storefront. I'm adding all my guests onto my Amazon storefront. So if you have a book, send it my way and I'll add it. And my partnership with LiveWave, it will be linked below for you as well. Until next time, Mama, keep showing up, keep trusting yourself, keep building the life that you want to feel that is good, holy, and happy and blissful. Until next time, thank you for coming on to the Balanced Boss Mom podcast. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Much
Bye, guys.